we're going to start. We're going to start. It's time. It is today, the 170th Security Thought Leadership webinar. 170th. And those of you who join us regularly will know the idea of our thought leadership webinars is to critique what's going on today in some areas of security in order we may get a more informed debate and a more different type of security in the future that's all the better for it. And as always, we choose a topic that is different and varied and seeks to engage with an issue important to security. And today we're looking at this thorny area of the role of HR and finance. Do they support security or do they undermine it? And as is our style, we have got three expert panelists and we're going to come at this from different angles. And in a minute, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite each of them to introduce themselves. And once they've done that, I will then come back to them and invite them to make an opening statement. 3 minutes when they get to say whatever they want to say about the subject area. And after that, we'll come to questions and debate with you, the audience. If you'd like to ask a question, please use your question and answer button at the bottom of the screen. But without further ado, then, let's go and meet our panelists. And first of all, let's go and meet Eva. Eva, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Martin. Hello, everyone. My name is Eva Müller. I'm currently a global HR business partner at Hilti, based in Liechtenstein, the middle of Europe. I'm an HR professional since I started my career some years back. I had the opportunity to move between markets and industries. So started my career in financial services editorial, then moved to production side as global HR business partner. And before I moved to Hilti, I actually worked at Amazon also as HR business partner supporting security and loss prevention, amongst others. That was the first touch point that I had with the security. I'm German, 42 years old, and living in Switzerland. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you very much indeed. That was a nice full introduction. Thank you very much indeed. Well, that's the HR. Let's go to the finance. And Tim, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Martin. It's really a pleasure and privilege to be here. My name is Meettima. I'm a Vice President of Finance for TE Connectivity, Automotive Asia Pacific business. What TE Connectivity does is a technology company that designs, manufactures, and deliver high quality connectors and sensors to our customers across all the industries. I've been 11 years in TE Connectivity, worked in Germany, and recently have moved to Singapore, being in charge of, as a CFO for Automotive Asia Pacific business. I think what is really important for me is the fact that even within TE, I've spent time in lots of different industries, industrial, machinery and equipment, energy, as well as automotive. So that gives me that a global perspective, an all-round perspective of different business models, and security is one of the topics I've been dealing with. Thank you.
Tim, thank you very much indeed, and a pleasure to have you. And that's also very interesting, and we're going to come pick it back on some of that experience, I'm sure. Well, you've heard from HR, you've heard from finance. Now let's meet Mr. Security. Mike, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Martin. Good afternoon. Mike O'Neill. I'm the Group Managing Director of Optimal Risk Group. We're UK based, but we operate with international clients. My primary career was in the British military. After that, I moved into what was then the security sector. What now I would like to think is the risk, resilience and security sector, as that has adapted over the years. Looking forward to today's input. I promise not to be too tough on HR and finance, but I think we'll get some interesting perspectives. So looking forward to it. So.
Mike, if you're here, we know we will. Thank you very much indeed. We'll come back to you in a minute. So now let's go and hear what they've got to say. We can ask each of our panelists to make an opening statement, 3 minutes, when they're going to be saying what they think about this topic. So without further ado then, let's go to Eva. And Eva, can we have your opening statement, please?
Thank you, Martin. So basically, when I think about the relationship between HR and security, what comes to mind is initially business impact. And with that also goes hand in hand financial impact. Hence, interesting to have Tim here as well. If it goes well, this relationship, it actually is a business enabler and fuels the business to success. It has positive impact, it's well invested money and resources, and it creates seamless processes as well as a safe, obviously, and a secure work environment. However, if I'm talking to HR colleagues, professionals, also on the security side, reality is often different. And the relationship between the functions is broken between HR and security. So basically, and that has impact in terms of duplication of effort, time loss. It creates increased costs as well. The investments made, especially on the security side, are not effective and not having the impact that you see. And the reason for that, when I talk to professionals for this broken relationship, it's obviously silo thinking, silo working. It's lack of communication, what I'm often seeing, and lack of understanding each other. And especially from an HR perspective, I often hear and realize it myself as well, it's very cumbersome working with security together, and it's just too complicated. And but if you say, do they need each other, the functions? I definitely would say yes. And even I would say that HR is more needed by security than vice versa, because it is a multiplier and enabler for security as well, in order to drive a mindset and a security culture throughout the organization. So I do believe if this relationship is broken, it's basically dancing just with one partner, the tango, or having a car company or a sports car without a fuel. So it's just not working well.
Eva, thank you. Excellent. Really, really helpful, and sets the context. And let's go from HR and let's go to finance then. Tim, your opening statement, please.
Yes, I'm good to go, Martin. I think I'll take a different angle, because the question was really, how does finance supports or undermines a security? I mean, I think we do both, Martin, and to the point that Eva raised, I think, where do we support and partner with security professionals? I mean, number one of the biggest finance decisions that we make, whether it's strategic or short-term from an execution point of view, are investment decisions. Where do we put our funds? Funding allocation is critical. Funds are limited. The question is always, do we put money in enhancing our security, or do we put money in buying the machinery equipment that we need to manufacture our connectors and sensors? Number two is when it comes into financial and business risk assessment, because we are the forefront of the business, and that's why I emphasized a lot the business background, Martin, was really around how do we help security professionals to really get into that business risk assessment so that they can help us design how do we make sure that we take into consideration some information security issues, as well as for us to be able to educate or share our understanding of some of the consequences if, for example, there was a data breach. I mean, what is the financial consequences of such issues? Also, as finance professionals, what we face quite a lot is really attempted fraud. In most cases, most of the time, people come to me, I get an email as if it comes from our CFO of the company saying, hey, Tim, you need to wire right now $10 million. I mean, it's my role to provide that feedback to the security professionals for them to be able to understand how can they enhance our access rights, as well as support me in making sure that I don't make those kind of blunders or mistakes. There was a component in one of your previous webinars, Martin, about internal and external audit. We support a lot of internal, external audit. That's another way to look at security. Where do we undermine security? I think we do sometimes. Number one is a lack of adequate funding, because finance people sometimes are pretty easy. We look at, hey, you want to spend $10 million in security, what is the return on investment? That's a jargon that most security people may not be familiar with. It's very easy to understand how much they want to spend. It's very difficult to quantify what's going to be the return. I think it's our role to see how can we partner with security professionals to be able to quantify the return on that investment, because it's a critical area when we make those decisions. Security sometimes is considered to be just like any other expense item. So, I mean, if it's an expense, I would rather not spend the money and spend the money in investments. I think this is where we undermine the security by not understanding what they do. And last but not least, internal audit function. Sometimes finance considers it to be their role is to help us improve our internal controls, but sometimes we consider them to be enemies because they may identify flaws in our internal control that may show that the finance function is weak. So those are some of the ideas which I had in terms of how do we support, but at the same time, where do we undermine security? But that is going to form that partnership, making sure that we support more than undermine the security function.
Tim, thank you very much indeed. Once again, fascinating and really interesting to get a finance perspective on it as well. Appreciate that. We'll come back to you in a minute. Don't forget, audience, if you've got a question you want to address, please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. There are a couple of emails, but if you can put it on the bottom of the screen, I'll be very grateful because it's easier to manage. Mike, interested to hear what you've got to say about this. Mike, over to you.
Right, Martin. So some of the things I'm going to say will sound very negative, but I will hope to finish on a positive. I think some of the key things we need to understand, we're talking about security professionals. Who are the security professionals? Are they contract, in-house? Are they uniformed? Are we talking about InfoSec security professionals, physical security professionals? Does the organization take an enterprise-wide approach to its broader risk? So we've got quite a spread there. HR will have little or nothing to do with contract staff brought in. That will probably be under facilities management or possibly under a security manager who may possibly report into a board level appointment, but often appoints into a facilities manager, which is an unhealthy relationship in my opinion. If you're talking about in-house, either in-house guarding and or in-house security management or managers, then HR is obviously going to have an important role there. In all honesty, it's not the sexy side of the business for most organizations. It's one of those areas where, as Tim said, it's an expense. If the organization could avoid spending money on it, it would. I think one of my strong beliefs in all of this is that too much security is not started from the right position. You've got to start from your threat and risk assessment. And that's got to take in physical security, information security, reputation, brand protection, all the other assets that you have. That includes the cash in the bank. It includes your personnel who are traveling who knows where across the globe if you're a large company. So there's a whole spread there. And I think for security, it's got to be about being seen as a value center, not just a cost center. So if we get our people moving around the world safely and securely, we've got to trumpet that fact back so the board understands the value that that security function brings to the business. If it's purely going to be seen as a cost, and I have seen this where FDs, financial directors are saying, well, we've had no security incidents, so maybe we're spending too much on security. Or maybe you're just spending the right amount and it's actually preventing all of those problems. But I also think we need to come back to the point, security managers, security professionals have got to do more about engaging with the rest of the organization, making sure that they understand the value they're bringing and they can see the value to their departments. And I think if, I liked what Eva said about not operating in silos, but we have to accept that businesses do. Sorry, I'm outside, that's the local church bells. Apologies for that. So that I think is where it sits with security professionals as well. They've got to trumpet their achievements and the value that they bring to the business a lot more so that the HR, finance function and the board understand what they do to protect the organization. So I'll stop there.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Really, really good. Okay, let me just get this going. And thank you very much indeed for questions which are coming in. Tim, I wonder whether I can ask you back to Mike's point about showing value. I mean, you said, I think, something there which hits at the nub of the problem, that security is seen as an expense, that it's not something that delivers value. What's the process by which security could meaningfully present an image which is one where it shows value? I mean, is that really a doable proposition from a finance point of view, or is the fact that it doesn't deliver something which is obviously something for the profit margin, it sort of reduces loss rather than delivers profit, is that an acceptable value proposition in financial terms?
It's doable, Martin. And Mike, in his introduction, he said, hey, security professionals need to engage with the business. Security professionals, same like HR or finance, it really depends on the business model of your company. For example, in my case, I work for an engineering and technology company. Finance is not a core function. It's the engineers, the manufacturing people. So for me to be considered a value-added partner, I have to do more than the engineers whose work can be seen in a tangible physical product that we sell to our customers. It's exactly the same with security. If you are a security professional in a company whose main product is to offer a security, there is a minimum you need to do to convince the leadership team to provide the funding. But if you're a security professional in a business whose security is not a core business or a core competence, you have a problem, which means you need to spend more time engaging with the different leaders in the organization, whether it's MDs like Mike or finance people, HR, to really provide your value proposition. That could be during risk assessment or on what could be avoided what can be avoided by spending more in security. Did I answer your question, Martin?
You definitely can answer my question. I'm going to come to you, actually, with a similar question. I mean, this point about security are always seen to be struggling for its professional identity, to be at the position of respect for its role in many businesses. Eva, I guess the world of HR has been on that journey, and HR professionals are now seen perhaps as higher up the corporate hierarchy in terms of having earned that respect. Is that right? Do HR professionals feel professional, respected, and loved?
Well, I think there's also no one answer to that, but I think definitely HR had been on this journey for long already. And it's all about, we talked about that as well, Tim mentioned it, Mike mentioned it, it's also earning the seat at the table of the business. And that doesn't come just purely with having a role, having a function. It's really how to also hear, Tim mentioned that as well, how to show being an enabler in an HR function, also here bringing the value add, because it's a support function. It typically doesn't exist because of just the function itself. It's a journey to become the trusted advisor, to be invited at the business table. And in order to provide or be able to enable HR or be an enabler, it really needs the business understanding. We talked about that as well. I need to understand what my internal customers need, what is their challenges, where do they struggle, and that goes from HR functions like talent acquisition through learning and development and the pure business partnering as well, to understand what's the market situation, where are the challenges, where are the risks as well that Mike said, and how as an HR person to support and enable the business. And I think this has been a long journey as well, and a lot of models have been created so to find the right subject matter expertise for each of the functions, be it on obviously of the shared service part, but also on learning and development, etc., to have the right people there, understand what's needed, and in order to provide the support and the value add as well.
Thank you very much, Mike. You're a good person to answer this question. So here we heard from finance, and it too has to justify its existence, particularly in some organisations. HR have been on the journey, and they too have got to go through the same process. Mike, is it true the advantage they've got is professional qualifications and a recognised professional route, whereas in the security world, anyone can do it, and frankly, and while there are some exceptions, the highest levels just haven't been up to it. They're just not good enough. Mike?
I think that's changing. So I'm a chartered security professional. We have seen a very strong rise in the membership. In fact, I came from a regulatory Chartered Security Professional Regulation Authority meeting earlier. Very heartening, the amount of people that are going down that route. I think qualifications, I think you yourself, Martin, were very instrumental in the early days of bringing that the sort of security management academic rigor to the sector. So I think a lot of that has been picked up, and I'm very heartened by the number of people now who are coming into the sector, but they're professionalizing themselves. They're doing security consulting courses. They're doing their MSCs. There are security focused MBAs now. So I think that is happening. It's percolating through. I think the image of people, ex-military, ex-police coming in still have a place, but it's also really good to see younger professionals who are deciding that's the route they want to take and coming through. I think there's also the whole professionalization. Dennis Shepp is reminding me about CPP, PSP. There's all of those that we could move on. But I think the key point that I would say, the most successful security managers I see are those that get out of the different silos. I'm a strong advocate for the fact that there will always be silos within business, but we have to drill holes in the silos and get that sort of Swiss cheese effect, whereby people do speak to others in other departments. It's very difficult for a security function to prove a negative. How many times were we burgled last year? Well, we weren't. Oh, so we don't need security. I mean, I've literally been in that type of discussion with people. So, but where we have to bring that forward is where the metrics are available, we have to pull them out. And Tim will understand that. If you can go to a finance director and you can prove your case and the numbers stack up and support it, then there's a strong case to get the budget or increase the budget. If we're looking at professionalism, then I think we need to look at training people within the organization. We need to support people doing that sort of tertiary level of education or some specific courses that come to the aid of the business. We also need to have a much broader look at the sort of whole enterprise risk piece. But you have to sell that concept. You can't just say, oh, I could do so much more if only they came and asked me. No one's going to come and ask you.
Mike, thank you very much indeed. And well, I'm sure we're going to come back to that point because, but let me come to pick up on something you said there and ask Eva. And it overlaps the point from Ian Woodmansey. And he asked about the role of HR in recruiting staff and the process for getting the right people. I wonder, Eva, that given what Mike is saying about the fact that some have got an interest in developing themselves, particularly the new entrants, how aware is the HR world of this distinct issue in security, that not everyone comes from a commercially aware background, and that being commercially aware or business aware, organizationally aware, is a key part of effective security? Is that something that HR would get as en masse, or is there a danger they see a good former police officer and a good former military as the ideal because they protect?
Good question, Martin. And I think, is HR aware of that in general? I think there's a lot of lack of understanding as well, and business understanding, also from an HR perspective, to see what security can bring also as opportunities and value add. And I think there it comes in terms of, we talked about the silo thinking. Often HR is not involved in how many aspects security has in the world. And when it comes to talent acquisition and recruiting, in terms of recruiting security professionals, I think also here you need to have a deep understanding, what does the business need? Is it in-house? Is it, Mike mentioned the contingent workers. So what kind of background is needed, to which kind of expectation for the role that you're recruiting in? And I think more so in the security side, you really need to understand what's the market out there, what is what is the background and what can you bring in order to also have the right mindset into the organization. And how HR typically get also this knowledge and this understanding. I think here the partnering between HR and security is key for that development, also from an HR perspective, to have the business understanding of security, how it can partner, how it can bring value add. And that's not typically how also HR is trained, also to see in terms of the right level of integrity or security mindset in general, what do you bring in and what matters in the talent acquisition side as well. I think there's a lot in terms of the key and core competencies that can still be developed also here as a joint effort between HR and security.
Interesting, Eva, because it's interesting that we see both sides. I mean, the irony is HR need to be informed, and they may be informed by the very wrong people in security. I mean, I guess it just it starts right there. Let me move on, and I'm going to come to you, Tim, if I might. And a question from Dennis Shep, who's very well renowned on the security circuit and has been a former panelist, I might add, Tim. And he's talking about the bottom line, and we hear a lot about understanding the bottom line in the security world, Tim, and being a business enabler. But to what extent, in what ways can these concepts, where they are an integral part of good security, and they are, how can they market that to people like you in a way that is persuasive? I mean, anyone can say I'm a business enabler. Anyone can say I'm conscious of the bottom line. What's the process by which skeptical finance maybe could be persuaded that this person I have here has got it, or this group has got it?
That's a great question, Mike. It goes both ways. I'll talk about the role of finance, but also I'll talk about the role of security professionals. I like what Mike talked about. Hey, security professionals are going through professionalization, like the journey that HR and finance have gone. Martin, I've been there before. Finance, when you talk finance, 20, 30 years ago, a finance was considered to be an accountant who is just doing the debit and credit or the counter. We went through the journey of saying, no, we are finance business partners. What does that mean? We want to be on the table when we talk about strategy, when we execute on the strategy. Also, we are very much engaged in talent issues. It's exactly the same journey that security professionals, depending on their level of seniority, they need to be aware of. We always provide, Martin, what we call within my company finance for non-finance managers. This is trying to make sure that we help non-finance people understand the basics of finance knowledge, also decisions that are being made. At the end of the day, everything, in most cases, everything needs to be converted into numbers for investors or leadership teams to understand. The question is really, how can finance enable, as part of that professionalization journey that Mike talked about, to help those leaders understand how finance thinks, understand the balance sheet, what's the difference between an investment, a capital expenditure, and an expense. So when they come talk to finance, it's very easy for them to speak the language of finance or of business. I mean, so that goes both ways in terms of finance, helping and supporting partner with security professionals in really enabling them to understand the basics of finance, but at the same time, security professionals need to help finance understand their value proposition. And then you talked about the bottom line. It really depends on where you sit within that bottom line, because there is a revenue generation. If you are not a core part of your company's value proposition, if you're not on the top line, then you are an expense. The question is now, how do you make sure that you can convince finance and business leaders that you are part of enabling that top line? Because if your ERP system is down just because of security flaws, there won't be a bottom line. You can't ship, you can't bill your customers, you won't get paid. So I think if security professionals would understand their company's value proposition, they can always tap into the holes. What if this is not going to be available for them to be seen adding value in what they do?
Interesting. I mean, Mike, back to this point, right? And I appreciate you're a chartered security professional, but I mean, in some ways, that's the elite, and there aren't that many of them yet in the great scheme of things. And Mike, this point about being able to relate to the business and understand it. What we're hearing from Tim and Eva is that security needs to explain its position. It needs to be able to place itself in a position where it can talk about these issues to get these helps. I don't hear that that's a key part of what security sees itself about as Mike. I don't see courses that are relating to that that sort of angle and anywhere near a common level. And I really wonder that, when you talk about chartered security professionals, would you say amongst that group, you would expect all of them to be well versed in these sort of issues and able to engage in that way? Mike?
I would expect the better ones, the more invested ones to be looking at that point, because it's a natural part of any organization that you're in. You may have a role to play, but you've got to look at how you add value to the overall enterprise from within that. And I think some of the examples I've seen of people coming up with cost savings, proactively looking at how they can replace personnel with technical solutions that will have a payback within 2 or 3 years, and actually improves the security. One of the issues that we often have with our clients is where they're looking to contract security in, and they're just looking at the lowest price or the lowest acceptable price that they will go with. And there's a strong pressure on that at the moment, particularly certainly in the UK, where contracts are going out and being let for, I think, quite unrealistic amounts of money that they're not going to get quality operators in. We tend to take, whenever we provide personnel, not manned guarding, but other personnel, we make a point to say we're not the cheapest and we never will be, because we actually believe in paying good operators reasonable money that they can live a life that they want to live, and actually they will be a lot more proactive, they'll be more motivated. The derogatory term that gets used is jacket fillers, and we've seen this ourselves with the Manchester Arena bombing. There were lots of security personnel on duty, but they weren't particularly motivated, they weren't well trained. So we have to look at this and say, hang on, when things go wrong, it's no good pointing at the security guard and saying, well, he or she didn't do well. Have they had the adequate training? How motivated are they on £9.50 an hour? And I think we need to really start building up the professionalism of the security personnel within the organization. I think it's vital for advisors like myself and my team, but internal security managers to really understand the business. A good point that was brought up earlier. What drives that business along? What makes that business tick? We've had crisis management issues where we've worked with their team, we've solved it. And there's one like 15 years later, I'm still waiting to go back in to brief the chief executive on the outcomes. As soon as it was satisfactorily resolved, where before I could walk up to his office and the PA would kick people out in there, I'd come in and brief him. I never ever got that final meeting because it was resolved. He didn't need to know anything more than that. So that was his take. They were back to making money, and that's what businesses are about. There are other organizations that have security issues that are not profit focused, NGOs and charities and things like that. But if we're talking about businesses, their bottom line is key. So you've got to show that you either add value to that bottom line or you protect that bottom line. It's not easy, but where you can, you should. So the guys like Tim understand that when you're there making your case and you've only got the metrics that prove part of it, but you can be persuasive about the rest, and understanding the language as well. I think it works both ways. Tim was talking about helping the other business unit managers understand finance and the terms and what that means. It's also important that security doesn't go around using acronyms that nobody else really understands. They've got to be in their communication. I think that's absolutely vital.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Question here. What do the panelists, in their own words, see as the barriers to forming an effective partnership with security? So let me start with you first, Eva. In your own words, you've been asked. If I could ask you to be fairly succinct here, because we're running out of time and I want to make sure we do justice. And I'll come to you, Tim, same question. Eva, what do you see as the main barriers?
I think one topic we addressed a lot is business understanding. From the bottom line, Tim and Mike elaborated a lot on that. The second one, I think, is alignment in terms of goals and vision. If that's aligned, and if HR and security and finance, the support functions go in the same direction, that just helps. And I think connected also to the business understanding is stakeholder management as well. To understand your audience, be it finance, be it HR or other support function or the business, to see what is the point that you want to get across and how to sell that in order to see where do you bring the value.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Interesting. Same question to you, Tim. In your words, the barriers to forming an effective partnership.
It's communication, Martin. We have to talk to each other and use, Mike said it, we should use the language that the other party understands. I mean, if you don't do that, then it's very difficult to forming that partnership. That's what finance have gone through. That's what HR have gone through, and that's what security professionals need to go through, depending on what they want to achieve. If external security professionals speak to internal security professionals, they speak the same language. There is no language barrier in communication. When they speak to non-security professionals, they need to be very much aware that there is a language gap. How can they simplify their value proposition for them to be able to get the outcome that they expect or they would like to have?
Thank you very much. Interesting. Mike, in your own words, is the questioner asked.
One thing I'd like to say that I meant to say earlier, and then I'll go straight on to that, Martin. I think the security function in the business needs to be heavily involved in understanding the business impact analysis process that is undertaken. Find out who's doing it. If it's not being done, start it yourself, because that way you can potentially start to put some metrics and some pricing around interruption to production, whether that's supplies coming in or finished product going out or whatever else that might be. Going back to the barriers, I'd agree with Tim and Eva. It's communication. It's communication. If you have not formed unofficial lines of communication around the business, so you know who to go to have a chat in another department. One of our clients had literally pretty much made a decision about opening a manufacturing plant in a foreign country before they even thought to look at a risk analysis or any security advice around it. And that actually cost them money because it delayed their planning and ended up with them going to somewhere totally different. Getting a security professional in the room to help early on, the same way that they would have a lawyer in the room. So professionals have got to push themselves in places and show that they can add value and that they do add value. And that value is not about saying, oh, no, you can't do that. It can often be about, well, you could do that, but it would be much safer if we were to do it this way. So it's not about saying no, but it's about putting your own particular slant on it with a risk and security head on. But no, go on. I think that's it, really. So.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the point is, Mike, it's just that I mean, let me ask you a direct question. What percentage of say corporate security managers in business do you think would be up to being able to be very good at understanding business metrics and business processes and implementing solutions which enable rather than get in the way? I mean, what percentage, Mike, would you say we're up for that?
I would say of the ones that we deal with, probably around 60%.
Okay, so it's still quite low, really. Oh, sorry.
But I would say that's up over the last 10 years from around 40%. So it's improving. I think there is an increasing professionalism, particularly in the in-house security management sector. A lot of very bright young people, both male and female, are coming in and really get the business that they're in, or make the effort to get the business. And I think that really pays off in the relationship when the MD, the FD, and the COO actually think you understand the business without them having to explain it to you. Your credibility walks into the room with you, and they'll listen to you.
Yeah, it comes back to that, doesn't it? It always comes back to that very point. Final, very quickly, Eva, and I'm going to ask Tim a similar question. Eva, is it any easier dealing with finance than dealing with security?
Good question. I think it's also, it comes to the competences that the people bring. And as Mike said, if you have the professionalism and the business understanding, we've talked a lot about that, and in the function, then it's easy both ways. But I think I wouldn't make any difference there. Maybe the journey for finance is longer on the journey already. But I think it comes back to the competences that they bring.
Okay, and Tim, just the other way around, is it easier dealing with HR than it is dealing with security?
It is. It's easier to deal with HR because we understand HR. We've been partnering for ages. I think we don't understand security, and then it does take both sides to come together. I think finance needs to put effort to understand security, and security professionals needs to take effort to make sure that finance professionals understand what their value proposition is, what's the value add. And I like what Mike said in terms of not what you cannot do, is a way how can you enable some of the business decisions.
Okay, Mike, you happy with those answers? You accept that?
Yeah, I think they're all good points. I'd accept it. I mean, I think my final comment really would be that it's up to the security sector to show itself as a value center, not a cost center, and that's not always easy.
Mike, I'm going to end on that statement because it strikes me as a very good summary of the whole webinar. And panel, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. A fantastic conversation. We could have gone on more questions, but that's always a good sign. Just out of interest, by the way, don't forget a copy of the blog that I'll be writing and a recording of this webinar will be on the website as from tomorrow. And it'll be there forever. And I know a lot of people these days, in fact, more people are looking after the event than during it live. So thank you very much indeed to my panel. Thank you very much indeed to the audience for questions. Thank you for those that sent them in advance. Just a few final comments from me, if I might, just to say that we've got OSPO's entries closing in the United States on Tuesday, midnight on Tuesday night they close. So they close in Benelux on the 11th of July. They close in Canada on the 18th of July. If you're in any of those countries and you know people in those countries, get them to get their entries in now. Don't leave it too late. France, Tachyonic Crime Awards, Cyber OSPAs, South Africa OSPAs and German OSPAs, they close in August. Don't leave it too long. Also to say, the Handbook of Security, the 3rd edition, was published last week. It's out now, 46 chapters from the leading players in the world. Let you know that's available from all good bookshops, so to speak. And finally to say, and for the first 169 webinars, I've told you what's happening next week, but actually we're taking a break over the summer from August and July and August. We're back in September. We've already got webinars lined up. We'll be in touch for more information about those then. So I'm sure I'll bump into many of you over the summer. I very much hope so. We're going to be out and about, but I always end these webinars with exactly the same comment. So since I've done it on the first 169, let me do it on the 170th. And that's to say, wherever you are in the world, until we meet again, stay safe.